since the school year started. She's, and it's, the travel things are also difficult. I wish we were right around the corner. She's stationed at Campbell, so getting her on overnight orders is sometimes a difficult thing. But she's been here every week. She's coming tomorrow. So she's been working some very, very difficult cases, but she is the go-to person. So if you utilize her, it's B-R-A-K-E, Linda Brake.
Well, yeah, and I don't have a specific
No.
issue. My issues are systemic.
No, I'm telling you for
Sure.
everyone, Ms. Lair.
Thank you.
So she is the go-to person. Last week, she brought up an assessor, and she brought up a psychologist. So they did some work that needed to be done, that was past due being work. So we stopped their programs down at Campbell, and we brought them up here, and we are going to do that again, I think next week. We're going to bring them up again. Part of the issue with using a substitute person is, do we have a substitute who's qualified? They have to be on the substitute list, which is a whole other problem for us to get a substitute.
We had this issue in Daegu where I came from a couple duty stations ago, and I was the SAC chair there, and we had this very same issue with these vacancies. And what that community did was the superintendent reached out to the community members and said, hey, you may not be on the sub list, but we're looking for X, or we're looking for a temporary speech pathologist, because you have those individuals in the community. And maybe they're not really looking for a sub job because they don't really need the money, or it's not something they want to do. But if called upon and they knew their profession and their specific skill set and experience was needed, maybe you'd get people to do that. But since I've been here, there's never been any kind of outreach like that at all to say, hey, like for example, I understand there was an English teacher vacancy at the high school for some time this year?
There was.
Yeah, so I mean, I never saw anything go out that said, hey, is there anybody who has a skill set that would enable them to do a good job filling this position temporarily? Maybe I would apply for that had I seen that. I mean, I'm not in the business of subbing, but I have taught and I would do that. So is there anything that stops the DODEA from reaching out to the community and saying, hey, apply? Because I don't know why things work slower here if they do, but when I was in Korea, by the time you applied to that sub list, you were on it in about 2 weeks. It didn't take anywhere much longer. Is that a similar time frame here?
No.
Is there a reason? I mean, it's all DODEA, right? It's all the same agency.
It is. Their staffing office in Okinawa works differently than the staffing offices here. Literally during the month of August, we had one personnelist who was really doing all of this work in our area office, primarily because we're going through this restructuring for student achievement, and they're finding out they're losing their jobs there. So they went out and found other jobs. I can tell you, Judy Allen, who's the superintendent in Korea, one of the reasons why she has shortages there is because the teachers are on a one-year rotation there. They can put in for a transfer program and they can move. So she's always got a revolving door. So there could be some agreement with their area director. I think right now, Ms. Laird, we're in a transitionary period with our agency. So I think in the next year, when things settle down and we've got people in place, it doesn't help us where we are today.
Right.
But I think a year from now, we won't be having this discussion, that we'll be able to staff faster than we have this year.
Well,
sure.
Thank you for your sincerity and your candor. It is much appreciated.
You're welcome. I'm sorry we're falling short. And
Thank you. Sir, one question I had, and one of the reasons there was this initial concern is because of the restructuring you just spoke to, and because of some of the gapped specialist positions. Do you see any issues meeting the regulatory requirements for both IAPs and 504s? Do you see any friction there?
there's always going to be a one-off where we're going to fall short for a family. That's always going to happen. It shouldn't happen, but somebody wants something faster, we're going to be short. It's part of my concern with finding the sub. I mean, sometimes you get lucky and you have an SLP there, a speech and language pathologist who could do that work. Or sometimes you might have a psychologist, which I doubt, but you could have a psychologist who moves in for 6 months and they're able to do that work. We know that it's an issue, but that's why we're bringing the folks up here from Campbell, and I've convinced them that we're going to need to continue doing this, even though the fiscal year ends next week, and we'll probably go under a continuing resolution, and then the travel dollars will be more difficult, and I'm sure you understand that because we have this opening, we need to still bring these folks here to do this. Do I wish I could have Linda up here more often, or an assessor and a psychologist? Yes, because we do have some needs. But I don't think we're going to fall short of the 45 days for anybody at this point.
Thank you. Are there any other comments or questions?
I have one quick question. I know we got a couple principals here. Do y'all have a list, or y'all updated on how many IEP students and 504 students are in your population at your particular schools? Like, do you know that offhand? Okay.
And I meet with my CS case study committee and also 504s. Get our counselors run our 504s. The case study committee I meet with every week, and part of that agenda, on the back of that agenda, is every kid and those timelines to make sure we're meeting those timelines.
Okay.
And so, we feel that's something we definitely track is the timelines.
Right.
Sure.
Thank you.
But I think, Mr. Dorian, it's about 15% of our population. So we have about 1,631 kids if the enrollment report that's in here is the same as it. So about 15% of that is, and I'm not the best at fast math, so, you know.
And saw a hand in the third row.
Yes, I just wanted to be clear. Did I hear you say that there a teacher referral for the accommodations for a student? Do you need a teacher referral for the accommodations for a student?
You as a mom could make a referral to the school. So, and it could be someone else. You know, it's a funny thing, when we work with kids, you could be sponsoring an after-school activity, a chess club thing, let's say, and you notice something about a child unable to use their left hand the way a normal, and you say, geez, that seems odd. And then you could make a referral to say, maybe you ought to call the mom and ask, is there difficulty using the left hand? Or if you're doing an activity where it's physical and you notice the way a child runs, and maybe they need to have some intervention with some physical therapy. So anyone who works for us or the parent can make a referral to the case study committee to look into whether or not interventions need to be made, whether they need to be made on an individualized education plan or whether they need to be made with a 504 accommodation.
So who would we contact if?
I hate to say contact the principal. Everybody wants to contact the principal first. You can contact the counselor at the school. That would probably be the first place I go. Brenda Tucker's here, so she'll take all your phone calls for all the schools at Knox.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Are there any other comments or questions on this topic? Hearing none, we will move to the next item, which is the next academic year school footprint and transition plan. And this is an item that will remain on the agenda for future meetings. And before we get into this, I would just like to thank the very professional team at Van Voorhis Elementary. They hosted Mr. Gerstner and the board today for a tour. I just was blown away by the professionalism of the teachers, the staff, and the learning environment there. So thank you for taking the time to do that. I appreciate it. Mr. Gerstner, I would like to, if you would, sure, if you can give us your impressions of we can table the King Solver.
I think it's okay if
you
we
want to
talk
talk
about
that now?
Sure.
Okay, and then perhaps talk about your initial thoughts on the appropriate footprint going forward.
Many of you know we're building a new elementary school here, and it's It's quite nice. It's just not quite ready. And when it will be ready is still to be determined. There was discussion last year about what kids would be going to that school and what schools would be remaining. When I first came on board here, I was greatly concerned that what was to be the projected footprint would have all the schools on the east side of 31W. And when I looked at the housing areas, the vast majority of the people live on the west side of 31W. And it was bothersome to me that then we'd be putting kids, most of our kids, on a bus to go to school every day. So and then I looked at McDonald Elementary, which was supposed to be this other school that was on the east side, and the facility, it's a solid structure. It's got a good heating plant to it. It's got a wonderful lobby when you walk in. It's a beautiful gymnasium, and then the rest of the place where the kids go, the classrooms, is pretty sterile. Mr. Cobb mentioned us going to Van Voorhis. You go to Van Voorhis, all those classrooms there have a restroom, and they have a place for the kids to hang their coat, and they have a place for the teachers to have a storage area and a workroom area. The classrooms at McDonald don't have any of those things. They have an exterior door which allows the kids to go out to recess at Van Voorhis. At McDonald, not so much. The restrooms, there's 2 restrooms that the kids can use at McDonald. So the boys have 2 restrooms and the girls have 2 restrooms. So I went to my bosses and I said, you know, it's hard for me to understand why we're not keeping Van Voorhis instead of McDonald. And they talked to me about the heating plant and all the structure itself. So I have started in motion the concept or the idea of keeping Van Voorhis open as we move forward. And in that discussion, it's come up that we would build a new school on that side, on that property that we own over there by Van Voorhis. So that's getting some energy, and that's it hasn't been funded yet, but there are plans. There were plans once upon a time, so they're re-looking at those plans. So the idea now will be who would go to the new Kingsolver, a brand new school that was built for 600 plus students, and who would stay at Van Voorhis. That I don't have an answer today. I don't know which neighborhoods we would keep and which would not. But as we move forward for school year 17-18, I'm of the belief that keeping Van Voorhis structure as a school is the direction we should go, and Kingsolver as our other elementary school.
And to those present, Mr. Gerstner has engaged the board for our advice and as a conduit with the community, and we take that seriously. And so going forward, we will continue to analyze this and communicate with those in this room and those represented by those in this room. Are there any ideas on the board on how to provide that advice and how to gather that input from the community?
I was going to suggest the board members maybe meet with the PTO presidents, ask them to gather feedback from each individual school and go from there.
So, ma'am, will you do that?
Yes,
I
ma'am.
make a suggestion on deciding which kids go where.
Yes, ma'am.
I spoke with Rick Lear for quite a bit about this. What about doing school of choice? If you alternated just by a half hour the elementary schools, and when they opened, you could bus all the children with school of choice to each elementary without ever really having to add on maybe 1-2 buses tops. And then it's first come, first serve. Whoever gets the request in for the school first, that's where they go. Anybody that doesn't put a request in, they fill in the gaps where most kids that are from their neighborhood go to they're the kid, they go to that school then. However, you can work it out best, but I planned like this whole thing out at one point of the school choice, and it would work with not a lot of buses. And it's just a matter of timing and everything. So I don't know if that's an idea or a possibility that you could sit down and look at.
I'd be happy to look at it. If you could, it would be great if we could put it in writing. So I
Yes.
could read it. That's wonderful. Please,
Yeah, I will do that.
please, thank you.
Mhm.
I'm not gonna come forward, but
Go ahead.
I would strongly suggest contemplating getting that gym at Van Voorhees air conditioned. If that school's gonna remain open, when school starts in August, and it's been in the 90s, that gym's coming like an oven every single day. And, we even into May, the whole month of May it's hot. So I'm still completely flummoxed as to how it is that school's been here all these years without air conditioning starting August 1st. But I would really ask you to strongly consider getting that air conditioning put in, because once you make the determination that school's gonna stay open, that should be first on your list.
Yeah, and I've put it down as something, just to give you a little historical background. Outside of the high school, all the other gyms here once upon a time, and we had 7 or 8 other schools, none of them, the gyms, none of them were air conditioned. They air conditioned Scott Middle School. Yolanda, do you know when? Or Laura? Okay, but that was the only gym that was ever funded. Now, they have tried to fund the air conditioning for the other schools to include the old King Solver gym that's sitting there. Beautiful facilities. I mean, they are really beautiful facilities. Mudge had a beautiful gym as well. They haven't, but I'm putting it down as something to consider. Thank you.
Are there any other comments or questions? So, to the other members of the board, do you see a need to set up a committee like we have for the calendar study? Potentially setting up a long-term committee, a member from the board?
Yeah, I think that'd be a good
Yeah.
idea.
That could work.
Thanks.
Okay. Are there any recommendations as to what the composition of that committee would be?
I'm leaning towards keeping the same makeup as we have for the other committee. An administrator, maybe a student, PTO member.
Yeah.
Mr. Allen, are you willing to serve as the board's representative on the committee with my assistance?
Sure. Glad to.
Okay. We have a second for that motion, or any other comments regarding that motion?
I second that.
The motion is carried.
Do we have a timeline, Mr. Gersner, on when a decision needs to be made? I mean, that's the key thing, I think, probably.
Well,
This is for the next school year, correct?
It's-
Is what
it's
we're
a-
looking at?
I've never hoped for much when it comes to building construction, but I'm really hopeful that they tell me that King Solver will not open in January. Anybody who was hoping for that, I'm hoping that it does not. The transition of a school from one school to another, regardless of whom we're moving in there, will just be difficult. As crazy as this sounds, the weather here is dicey at best in the winter months. And if we lost even one day of transition there, it's going to cause a problem. So I'm hoping that we don't open. And if that happens, Mr. Doran, it's a long answer to a short question. The bottom line is there isn't a timeline for us to do that immediately. So I would say we need to have something stood up so that parents can prepare, and our teachers, we're going to have to work with our teachers on who's going to go to what school. I would say no later than January.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'm just thinking if we don't need to delay it too terribly wrong, a decision can be made if it's agreed upon, and then people can start moving toward that going into next year. And on the last day of school, which is May 25th, on May 26th, people know what's going to happen, that they can start preparing and be prepared for that for the following year.
I would suggest that you consider, as part of the committee, looking at parents that are in particular neighborhoods, somebody from Pritchard Place, for instance, somebody from Maple Ridge, or just somebody who maybe has the pulse. I don't know, do they have mayors, sir, in each one of the little communities? No, okay.
No.
No.
I don't know how you do that, but, you know, if you're not riding a bus now, and now I'm telling you you're going to ride a bus next year, that could be impactful. One of my, and I'm not telling you the school choice thing is off the table, I'm just telling you, one of the things that we did at Campbell last year, and we changed a lot of people's school. We stressed that keeping neighborhoods together was important. And the reason why we did that, especially if they're bused, it helps with carpooling situations. It helps with homework situations. It helps with those stories where, do you know what's going on at that school? If they're all going to the same school in a neighborhood, that works out really well. Does it work for me as a superintendent with transportation? Of course it does. You know, I'm not going to tell you that it's not a budgetary thing. It does. But for families, keeping the neighborhood school concept together, and it's one of the reasons why I have promoted keeping Van Voorhis open, because there's something about a neighborhood school where the kids can walk to school, where their moms can walk, or dads, they can come in, and their parents are going to be more active if they don't have to get in a car to go volunteer. So it makes sense to me to keep the school that way. So those are just my thoughts before you organize the committee. Yep, a couple of minutes.
I'm just curious if you guys have thought about separating the grades and having specific grades at Van Voorhis, and like stopping at third grade and having the kids from McDonald that are K through 3 going to Van Voorhis. Just an observation from going from one school to the other, or one post to the other, it just seems like the classrooms are very full, and they're trying to just squeeze all of these grades into Van Voorhis. But I have one child who can learn with everyone around her talking, and then I have another child who is, he needs that one-on-one, and he doesn't get it because there's just so many children that he starts to fall behind, and she can adapt to whatever. But